Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transfer Show, our daily show here on Anfield Index, because we have a lot coming in and the stories just keep happening. And so much so that, having completed our other show a couple of days ago, Dave reckons we have enough here to talk left backs to you today. And there will be a surprise segue right at the end. Probably no prize for guessing where that next show will be, which we'll get back to you on within a couple of days. This is how we roll now, it seems. And as the league gets a little bit closer each week, which is lovely to be able to say, what a thing to be able to say. And I think let's never lose track of that, the joy of that. Like I said last show, things are going to get hectic. Things are going to get hectic. Lads will come out from under their cover of being nice and for the cause and start saying how they really feel about their situation at the club. And it's going to be fun. Even if some people will lose some of their favorites, that's just how it goes. But to get us rolling on this, let us enter Mr. Dave Davis to talk about the left back topic. And Dave, we've loads of places to go, but just in a general way, man, what is your feeling and what are you getting on the idea of this being really an important place for us to address? We had thought it was at the start of last campaign, but it turns out that maybe to give them the benefit of that, maybe it's part of some greater scheme of things here, that we get the coach in, we see how he gets on, we take a punt on that, and then we'll start addressing things if and when. Surely now, man, that has to be addressed.
It's like almost in the opposite way. Would it not alarm you if any Liverpool fan said we don't need a new left back? It would kind of like scare the bejesus out of me. Like, what game are you watching at the moment? That people have their, and it says on the screen there for those that can't see it, like left back, is it priority? It's mandatory. It's both. It's whatever word you want to use, because some people talk about, well, we need a centre forward and this, that, and I get that, but it's one of the mandatory positions, isn't it? We have to get a left back, no matter what order you put your centre forward, your left back, your DM. It just absolutely has to happen. And it's not wanting to beat up on players too much, but the evidence is just startling. We're seeing it every week. I mean, in the last week alone, think about the Fulham game and the struggles that Andy Robertson had in that Fulham game, and then the own goal. And you could say unlucky, and I get that. Virgil said, "Yeah, it was me." But there's one thing about that word "lucky," Trev. If you're not good, be lucky. We all know that saying in life, don't we? And Andy Robertson, he's definitely, without wanting to beat up on him too much, not the first one at the moment. And his look seems all out in the worst possible way. And a few people have used this phrase, which I completely agree with. He's at the scene of the crime, isn't he? When anything tends to go wrong, it's not the worst phrase in the world. He's at the scene of the crime all the time. I mean, I actually, for anyone who's going to start on this, like 8 million quid, legend, world-class left back in his day. Get all that out your system. Yeah, absolutely. We're talking now. We're talking where we sit right at this time. And there's a bit it's worth, I think, exploring into for Sam Maguire as he wrote about certain things, which is important to call out. Links to other left backs as well. But even stats, metrics, which I know isn't always the transfer show feel, but it's important to bring in the info we're getting in that regard as well. So, yeah, your starting point, Trev. If you don't think we need a new left back, I question everything about you as a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, you're probably not asking the right questions. I'd like to tease this out a bit because, as you said, and you've teed it up there with the heading, it has to be a priority. It just has to be for various reasons. And I was really confused about something that happened at the weekend, which was seeing Andy Robbo come on so early for Tsimikas, because I hadn't seen what Tsimikas had done that was wrong. And I wasn't listening to anyone who wanted to talk to me about managing minutes for a lad who wasn't injured and was available and has not played. So that kind of thing to me made little or no sense. Now I have a little different theory, and it's just pretty much come to me now listening to you talk there. Do you think that the reason why left back is such a priority is that the manager really does not rate Tsimikas? And the reason I'm floating that out there is not because of any inside information I've got, but what else would justify bringing Andy Robertson, who'd had a stinker on so early in the game the last day, so he could come on and kind of not be very good again? There are two reasons I think you would do that. One is you really want to get Andy Robertson back into it and give him a chance to get that mistake out of his system and blah, blah, blah. And the other is you really don't want this guy, Tsimikas, to be on the pitch any longer than he has to be. You put both of those things together and it doesn't paint a very good picture of Kostas Tsimikas.
No.
And it does tell you that Robertson is the preferred choice. And yet we can see, and it's not, as you said, not to bag on the lad. It's not about even the most recent mistakes. It's honestly not. It's about sort of diminishing returns over a long time now. And so we come back then, don't we, to the idea of him as a lad and whether he'll be okay with the idea of playing second fiddle should we do some recruitment. But just to finish out that point about it being a priority, how can it not be, man? How can it not be? When you see that, what was you? Did you have any far more rational explanation than I could come up with there? Is that some harebrained theory I've got? You see where I'm going with that? Like, what else could justify it?
100%. I think it was something that a lot of people were asking because Tsimikas was in the lineup. He started, didn't he, after Robbo had thrown that stinker? And obviously, Liverpool have now moved to 1 game a week to finish the season. So the premise that every journalist, everyone was leading into was strongest side possible every game until it's won. Complete logic, innit? Win the title, strongest side and all that. And one of the two changes was Szoboszlai probably didn't have a good game, did he, against Fulham? So he comes out. Robbo definitely didn't have a good game. So he comes out for Tsimikas. And you were thinking, Tsimikas, fresh legs. That's at least part of it. And then you watch the game, and he's not a world beater, Tsimikas, in that game, but he doesn't really do anything wrong particularly. He puts in a few good crosses as well. And especially that game on Sunday, the subs got worse and worse, didn't they? The effect on the team. And Robbo, you know, again, try not to bag on the lad, but you've just got to be factual about what you observe. So I think there's massive weight in that. And the other thing that came up, and it's important to mention it's in this Sam Maguire article, but also on the day, Robbo is creating little at the moment to nothing, Trev. Absolutely little to nothing. You can't sort of ignore this. Sam Wright's no longer that creative menace. His expected assists is the lowest it's ever been in his career, and it's halved from last season. So it's going on the wane big time. In case of land, people thinking this is just factual, Andy Robbo also has 0 assists in the Premier League this season. Do you remember back in the day when he was doing, was it the wingmen with Trent, and it was 10, 50, you know, when we were competing, weren't we? Now, the record's incredible. Andy Robertson sits in the all-time records, doesn't he, of assists? Brilliant. Absolutely legend in his palm. I wouldn't dispute that. But he sits on 0 this season. He's at his career lowest at Liverpool. Like, not only does the eye test tell you he's declining, all the stats say the same thing as well. I just love him, whatever. I just don't see how you come to any other conclusion than there's a massive concern there now.
We're going to use this as a segue into the next part of the show. And it's always nice to feature Sam, who, you know, did a big old stint back in the day when he was a fetus with Anfield Index. So it's always nice to feature his articles, and he's featured quite heavily with a few cool little stories of late, big stories too. But you bring up something there that hits home with me. There's probably very few bigger Robbo fans going around than myself, and I know you're a big fan too.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I can't do that thing of just lying, like you just said a few minutes ago. So for me, it has been diminishing returns, and that's a disappointment. You don't like to see it. It can't just be about legs, can it? And yet, It quite possibly is, because when you think of most of Robbo's assists back in the day, it was about him doing these gut-busting runs, overlaps, getting in behind, playing a 1-2 and getting a pullback or a cross from the byline. And Robbo's increasingly not in that position. That's an issue. And so to talk about the next little thing around Robbo and why we feel that this show is worthwhile because it has to be a priority, is there potentially a little bit of a discrepancy between the Robbo that we see and the Robbo that Robbo sees? You know where I'm going with this.
100% know where you're going with. And just before anyone thinks we're putting a slant, a bias on this, let's just listen to Robbo with his own words when he was asked on international duty about this. Just even this minute of clip audio, Trev, I think it is quite enlightening for how Robbo sees it. So I'll just play it for everyone.
I think we've been linked with pretty much every left back in the world. But look, that's part and parcel of it. You know, you play for one of the biggest clubs in the world. I've been very lucky that I wouldn't put it down to luck, but I look back on, you know, these 8 years that I've had there, and I've been, you know, the starting left back at one of the best clubs in the world for that long, and that's something I'm very proud of. You know, within myself, and your time comes, and I don't think my time is there yet. But you know, whatever happens with the club now, whether we do bring in somebody or we don't bring in somebody, then so be it. But you know, I think I always back myself. Look, there's been a couple of moments this season where I've maybe not covered myself in glory and things like that, but I also think maybe other things have been, you know, took way out of proportion. I think certainly the last couple of months, I think the performance levels have been there for me. I think the performance levels have been there for the team, which makes it easier. But I think, you know, if you look back on probably all the games this season, then I've had a relatively good season.
Quite, even in just a minute there, that's just a minute of audio, Trev. And it's always opinions, isn't it? But I think I've had a relatively good season. I still back myself, you know. I think it's blown all out of proportion. Like you, I love Robbo. And I get he is a fighter, so he's going to come out fighting his own corner. Of course he is. There's no doubts about that at all. You know, that's why he's a captain. He's part of the leadership group as well. But like you said, that doesn't back up, in our opinion, what we're seeing at the moment. That also, it doesn't strike you as someone who we should probably steer into, like, thinks it's I'll happily drop to number 2 and see out my career and play out a few games for the Reds, that type of thing. I just thought just that minute of audio was so distinct we had to play it.
Well, it's a beautiful bit of context because it's an honest opinion from a guy who, and this is where I come down on this, and I said it to you before. I think I said it in the last show. It's a guy who's incredibly proud. Yeah. And I think, you know, I've had some interesting interactions on Twitter this week. We'll get back to it later on. I think if you understand what it is to be a proud man who likes to think that he's good at what he does, you will be able to relate to that. You don't want to think about someone who's coming up and who's better and who could push you out. You know, it's not a pleasant place to be. And if you have that level of competitive pride, which is one of the chief attributes of Andy Robertson as a footballer, that grit, that determination, those cliched words, that's ingrained in you. It's hardwired into you as a person. I don't want to hear Andy Robertson saying, well, maybe we'll get like someone like Milos Kerkez in and we'll improve, and then I can maybe come in for 20 minutes every so often. Like, you don't want to hear him say that, because that would mean he's not him anymore.
No.
So I think with a situation like that, you're looking at, and I think we've got the right man, by the way, to make this call now, the dispassionate man that is currently the manager, as opposed to the guy who plucked him from obscurity, gave him his break, and had him as a lieutenant for so many years. I don't think Jurgen finds that as easy as a decision to make, but I think our man in now is capable of that ruthless cutoff. Yeah. But you've floated this out before, and we've discussed on various shows, including Raw. I mean, if we were to let one go and get one in, because as you said last week, one of the few things we've been linked with very, very, very clearly is left back. What about the Tsimikas idea? Why? Like, I mean, most people will agree that Tsimikas is not the player Andy Robertson is when Andy Robertson is at his best. It's just that Andy Robertson at his best is not a common thing these days. If you were going to keep Tsimikas, what are the arguments for that? And do you have any insight as to whether he is liked by the manager? Because, like, I've just given you my theory, man, with that substitution. I think that's a guy who our manager, Arnie, would rather not have on the pitch if he didn't have to. I can't see it any other way.
Almost, I'm going to call it conventional wisdom, or the majority of wisdom seems, quote unquote, seems to be around this, that you keep Robbo with a year left to go because of his leadership, his impact on the group, well liked, etc. You get rid of Tsimikas, which seems to be the common wisdom for whatever reason. And also, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, but the guy who broke Tsimikas to Liverpool, Giannos, and a huge name, I'm not going to try and pronounce or embarrass myself on that, actually said this week there are 3 Premier League offers in for Tsimikas. Now, I don't know on this. It'd be interesting, and I don't want to be derogatory, but there must be something when 3 Premier League clubs are interested in Kostas Tsimikas in the first place. And the reason it's worth exploring or just mentioning, why I called it the perceived wisdom, is when you actually look at Kostas's stats, as you mentioned it on Raw that you've talked about, the Up Boys looked at it last night, and from digging and really exploring into it, not all of them, but on the surface, Trev, Tsimikas' stats are better per 90, on the average element. He's younger. But it almost seems like it's a complete no-no for a lot of people. And it's quite clear, Arne Slot, as you said, the minutes tell their own story. He doesn't trust Tsimikas. And from digging on this, all you can kind of get is along the lines of, absolutely it doesn't. But it's in terms of Tsimikas can be a bit rash. He's not liking what he's seeing in training and various things. So the evidence is just there, whatever you think of it. Tsimikas is not favoured, but we need to be clear on this, as the Up Boys mentioned the other night, as various people are calling out, the stats for Tsimikas per 90 tend to be better, just in simple terms. I mean, we talked about expected assists there. I mean, Kostas in the 94th percentile for 0.2. Loves a cross, doesn't he? Dangerous balls into the box. That's his game, 0.2. Robbo, at an all-time career low, dropped to 0.18 and decreasing. So a lot of metrics, like just on, if you were just leveling it on pure stats and age and the contract and the profile, Robertson actually makes more sense than a lot of database people will tell you. But conventional wisdom just seems to be leadership. Well liked by all the players because Virgil calls him, like a brother. And I get there's a validity in that argument, but it just kind of mystifies me almost the way it's just dismissed, the whole data and that element, considering isn't that the way we're supposed to be run at the moment?
Yes.
Or have I something?
Man, it's a great point. It's a great point. You can't keep talking out of both sides of your mouth. And that's what people do in these debates. And they set themselves up. They make themselves hostages to fortune with the things they say. Just be honest. If you're honest, you can't fuck up, right? So we talk and we try to be as completely open and honest. We like both players. But we're looking here at objective statistics. And people want to talk about intangible things like leadership. Okay, show me where that happened and it was leveraged to good effect of late. Just show me one example. That's all I'm saying. Like, we have to be honest in the discussion. And there was a time when this man, Andy Robbo, was such a titan of our team. You know, an out ball all the time for Trent with those big ping diags. A brilliant man to retain possession, a great lad for a 1-2, fantastic on the dead balls. There's another thing. Tsimikas' dead balls are much better now too. Or at least eye test wise, I think they are. Maybe the stats boys would care to differ, but for me, his corners certainly seem to be better. Yeah, it's a big one, Dave. It's a tricky one, and it's obviously got to be about how it might be perceived by both players. And Tsimikas is used to being a bit part player. Robbo is not used to being a bit part player. So let's just finish it with this. I mean, let's be honest about how we think this might go down. If Tsimikas gets kept on, he'll be kept on, and he might go, you know what, I'm this age now, I'm still at the top club, just won a medal. Who knows, maybe the new recruit won't cut it, or maybe he'll get injured. I can still be a big part of a big club.
Yeah.
Or he might say, screw it, I've got great money for the last few years, I'm off to play regular ball in wherever league. And like you said, there is Premier League interest, which is wild. And it shouldn't be wild to anyone, really. So you wonder how he'll take it. I think he's more likely to be able to be adaptable to the concept of being second. Yeah. I don't think Robbo's going to take that well at all. Again, the pride thing. Show me a world in which, and we've just seen it, you played the interview. Discuss for me the reality in which Andy Robertson is second fiddle. How does that look to him? How does that feel to him? A guy who has the pride that we saw jumping at him there. I love that little line as well. It was a lovely little dig where he said, like, I've been lucky enough that, well, there wasn't much luck in it, really. You know, he won't even give that. He won't even do that, like, false humility thing, because he's like, I worked hard. I'm a good player, and I've made the very best of my career. And he's well entitled to that opinion. So do you see a world in which he's happy to take a secondary role in the season to come?
I'm struggling with it a bit. And people will reference like the whole Hendo scenario where, you know, the Jurgen Klopp had that discussion. It obviously didn't go very well. And we all know what happened from there. So that's almost a worst case scenario that no one wants. The problem I've got is, like you said, it's back to that clip. I think and again, you never know for definite, but in Robbo's head, he sees someone coming in and he's competing like he is with Tsimikas right now, and he can win that battle and get on top and, you know, be an alternate. And maybe this player comes in and, yes, my legs aren't what they were, but, you know, they can cover me at times. There's no way Liverpool are spending the money they're talking about spending to bring in a player who's going to play the minutes Tsimikas is. Not a chance in hell to start with. Then how does Robbo see that? And also, as you mentioned, God love Arne Slot, the head coach, you suspect he'll be quite frank in terms of if he sees it this way, like, no, he's one, you're two, or, you know, we'll say you compete. There's that element. But just as you said, everyone is just assuming this one line, and you mentioned pride. Everyone's assuming Robbo's going to swallow his just automatically, you know, and do the good for the team and do his place and all that. A lot of these players are absolutely at the top in a good way because of their fight, because of their mentality, you know, the way they know back themselves against all odds and all that type of thing. I completely understand that. But I think, just personally, a bit like you, everyone is making this the rosy last season, then into the sunset on a free as a hero. And it's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think there's a few maybe just personally assuming this is all going to go down that smoothly.
Yeah, and just for balance, Simple Life in the chats there, I flicked it up so people could see it. Reckons we're being way too hard, and Robbo said he had a tough time with injuries, no pre-season, probably played when he should have rested. That's a squad issue because of no trusted backup. Again, that's a comment on Costa Tsimikas. And he says he's still a quality squad player, and right there is the only issue I'd have. Like, Simple Life's opinion is every bit as valid as anybody else's, and fair play. And I don't think we are necessarily being hard on Robbo. I think we're talking objectively. I hope so. But the only thing I would take issue with that comment is, we spent the last 5 minutes talking about how Robbo is not interested probably in being a squad player. I don't see a world in which he is interested in being a squad player, whereas Kostas Tsimikas has proven that he can do that job and is happy to do it. That's the point. That's the point we're making. Interesting stuff, Dave. It's gonna obviously this is our context for why we think this is the priority signing.